Summit. He's doing some amazing and interesting work, so I don't want to steal his thunder at all. But he's just, besides just being brilliant in terms of the work that you're doing, he's just a really fun guy. So get to know him and say hi to him, and someone else to network and meet with. All right, George.
Thank you.
All you.
Hi, everybody. You know, in Boston, this is called a clicker, right? So we got the clicker, so we're all set. I teach in the management school at MIT, and I've worked with a lot of companies over too many years than I can imagine in my career. And so the question is, why am I up here to talk to STEM educators? And the reason is that I did some very early work on digital transformation, which is now a word we all use, right? And we've done work in thinking about what happens to jobs when AI takes over. And what I realized about 4 years ago was that we can do all of the analysis for what companies can do. We can do all of the analysis for what trends will happen and what skills are needed. And yet we were not doing anything to help people actually get the skills. So for the last 4 years, I've been focusing really on that. How can I work with companies and with other groups to help people get the skills they need for their first job and for their whole careers? We're calling this co-creating the future of workforce learning. And about a year ago, actually June 17th last year, so we were just in our second year now, we launched this thing called the Global Opportunity Forum. That's how met Kelly and everybody else here in the idea of working together. Now, this is something where educators and employers can work together to make this happen. And my point of view is that certainly we know how colleges and employers can work together, although that doesn't always work as well as it should. We know how community colleges and employers can work together, but that doesn't work as well as it should. What we don't know as much about is how can K-12 educators work with employers and make this happen? How can you take what you're already doing a great job of in teaching STEM and help people be even more ready for their first job and onward as they want to go? So I wanted to share some thoughts with you now from our work to help make this happen. Now, if I could ask, I have 45 minutes, but the timer's not going, so I don't know how much time I have left. Is there a way to set that? Well, now it says 10 minutes. Okay, thank you, that's great. My watch, I lost it. So this is my watch right now. Okay, so co-creating the future workforce learning, how can STEM leaders help to shape the future for students and society? That's a big title. We're not going to do that all in 45 minutes, but I want to share some thoughts on what we're doing it. This is what we used to worry about. This is what why I got involved in this stuff, is we believed that your skills would be useless, right? The waiter has been replaced by a robot. And the joke was this: in the future, the only job left for people will be to fix the robots when they can't fix themselves, right? Now, we at MIT did a 3-year study across the smartest people at MIT in economics and in engineering and in social sciences to try to figure out what's happening. Are the robots taking over? And it's an interesting study. There's a book that came out of it. The one thing we found is that jobs are not going away, but they are being replaced. This job goes away, that job comes back. But more than that, what happens is a piece of a job goes away, and you need to add new skills in there. Number two, this is happening more gradually than we thought. There was a expectation out of Oxford that well over a third of all jobs would be replaced by AI by a few years from now. That's not happening. It's happening slower, which is good, but it certainly happens faster than traditional educational institutions change. And then there's a lot in here about improving the labor market, improving all kinds of things, but investing in the ways to cultivate and refresh worker skills. Now remember, this keeps saying workers, but everybody you teach are workers, just not yet, right? And we want to keep moving forward. The thing is that the world keeps changing, right? So you got geopolitical challenges on what's happening to jobs. Digital transformation, routine work is quickly going away. And what counts as routine work that can get replaced is getting more and more there. It used to be that driving was a job you couldn't replace with computers. Now my car drives itself. And they're talking about long-haul trucks that you take it to the highway, it drives across the country, and you pick it up to do the last little bit, right? Writing used to be a job that only people could do, all right? But ChatGPT is there now. And then in addition to that, we're also got some rethinking. What do people want for their jobs? Do they want to be in the same kinds of jobs their parents were? My kids don't want to work the way I did, right? They figure employers should treat people better than my employers treated me, right? And there will be other changes. So there are big changes going on here. But what does that mean for where we're going? We have this problem that employers need talent. Employers have skill gaps to fill. They often find, though, that it's easier to hire somebody new rather than train somebody internally. And as educators, what do the students need to know? Number two, what will they need to know when they're 40 instead of 21, bless you? And what's the best way to teach them? All of this is changing. The Challenger Center, what a great way to teach them skills. That's not how I learned. Now, I learned back in the Stone Age, but I don't know whether that's the way you're teaching your people, right? So, and then connecting across the programs. The other thing that we need to understand, that you need to understand, and I think you do, but maybe you don't, right, is that I'm going to get in a lot of trouble right now, right? But we educate people so they can support themselves through their lives. So education should be about skills for jobs. It shouldn't just be about skills, about making me a better person. Now, my kids both graduated from a Jesuit college. And at Georgetown, they do it really well. They train you the skills, but they also train you to be an amazing thinker and an amazing person, right? But you got to have all that. My kids could be amazing people, but if they're not employed, then I'm in trouble, right? I've got to support them the rest of their lives, right? So I'm going to come at this from this emphasis that education should be about employability from the beginning. And certainly we're learning, why are you doing STEM? Because STEM is a lot about employability, right? People need help to find good jobs. Companies need help to find the right people, but educators also, what are the right programs? And remember, I'm talking about this from a workforce element. I don't know that you'd call yourself a skilling program, right? But how do you develop the right programs? And for the governments also, how can we put this all together to make this work for people? I pulled this up. This is a recent thing on the top jobs that are coming out. And this is just from last night. And this is from US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you can see what are the fastest growing jobs. Nurse practitioners, that's a STEM job, right? Wind turbine, that's a STEM job. Ushers and lobby attendants, not a STEM job, doesn't pay very well, right? Motion picture projectionists, doesn't pay very well. Cooks don't pay very well. Data scientists, pays pretty well and growing. So one of the things that you are doing with your STEM skills is you're helping people not just get the jobs, but get jobs that will pay well. I don't have to tell you that. You know that. But just want to come back to that idea that if we talk about fastest growing jobs, what we need to have is fastest growing jobs that will sustain you over time. This is some analysis I did with some postdocs a little while back. Pre-pandemic job growth. By the way, I love that this is a STEM audience, and so I can show a slide like this and you're not scared of it. So the axes, horizontal is growth of employment, vertical is growth in wage over a 10-year period. And what we did is we looked across all the job categories in the US labor banks. There were close to 1,000 of them. And we ran the statistics to cluster the skills and came up with 8 different levels, 8 different types of skill that are already in the descriptions for these jobs. And then we looked at how those jobs are growing in wage and growing in employment. And this is pre-pandemic, so we need to redo it because pandemic messed everything up, right? But look over there on the right-hand side. Technology jobs, math jobs, not growing in employment or wage on average. Now, they're already pretty well paid, but on average not, right? Look on the right. Which ones are growing in employment? Jobs that involve leading, jobs that involve cooperating, jobs that involve teaching people. Now, that's not you teaching. You know what your wages are. But that's jobs where you're helping people go forward, right? So the employment's growing not in the technical skills, but in human, in social skills, right? What I call the human skills. And by the way, the only one that's growing in wage and employment is leadership. Supervising people, leading people, running projects, this kinds of thing, right? And when I was in school, that's not something we learned. You know who learned leadership in school? The football players, some of the club presidents. I think we had something called junior achievement, but it didn't really do a whole lot, right? Where was the leadership in the projects that we were doing? Now my kids, they at least have group projects and things like that, but the group projects don't reward you for being a leader. The group projects reward you for getting the job, as a group, getting past the finish line. I love the fact that the next session is going to be about leadership, because one of the things that we found when I was in consulting hiring people is that we wanted to hire for grit and leadership. And where could we find those people? Grit, if they were runners, rowers, and swimmers, they showed a lot of grit because they were out there practicing when they had to do it for the race, but they also were constantly being measured, constantly. So if you were, that was one way, all else equal, that was an interesting way to get people. I know another consulting firm that if you were a Division I athlete and you have the smarts and you have the good grade, the courses, that gets you the leg up. Why Division I athletes? You got the grit, but you've also worked hard in teams with difficult personalities, and you've learned to lead over time. So this data at least says that how can we help to improve the leadership skills for people going forward, right? And I think we can do it from early age, because we do it on the teams. Where else can we do it? Here's the other challenge, though, that when we have these analyses about, like I just showed you, what the jobs are that are growing, what are the jobs now that are the good things, this is changing really rapidly. Now, I said the pandemic changed a lot of things, but this is out of BCG and Burning Glass. Of the top 20 skills requested since 2016, 37% have changed. What does that say, right? When you're going to have somebody from K through 12, or you're going to have them in college for 4 years, what does it say about how fast your programs need to be changing or adapting to meet this world? I think the answer is not to teach the skills for this job. I think the answer is to teach skills that will help people continue to grow in their jobs. Just one more piece of this to add a little bit more data. This is data we just published recently. And once again, I love being able to show you the graphs. We know there's a premium for grit. You get paid more if you're gritty. That's good. But the best gritty things right now, computers are incredibly gritty. Computers do not give up on the task. They'll keep going, right? So what is the value of grit when you're in a world of computerization? And what we found was that basically if you are in a routine job, there's zero value for grit as computers come in. But if you're in a non-routine job, that premium stays there. So we want to be training people to be able to do these non-routine jobs. And what does that mean? Comfort with ambiguity, creativity, being able to deal with a whole variety of tasks coming at you, not just the one that you're doing every day. Okay? One more piece of data, just because, heck, I'm from MIT, I got to show you data. We looked across something like 200 manufacturing programs and certifications to understand what are the skills required in basic and advanced technicians. And you can't read this slide. Just know that the basic is the yellow and the advanced is the pink. But what we see here is that there are certainly manufacturing materials, there's certainly safety, there's manufacturing processes, machining, all the things you'd expect to see in manufacturing jobs. But there's also ethics, problem solving, professional skills. Now, what do professional skills mean? Do you show up on time? Do you get along with your coworkers? Do you concentrate on task? Do you talk back to your boss or not? Right? We talked to the employers, said, if we get you more highly trained people, will you pay them more? And they said, no. And I said, why? They said, because just because they've got the skills doesn't mean they're good workers. So we'll bring them in low, and if they're good workers, we'll bring them up fast. And I talked to the employers, I'm like, well, fine, you can say that, but Amazon's paying 20% more than you for those low-paying jobs. Who's going to take your promise on this, right? So we need to work together so the employers know whether you have the professional skills when you graduate. It's a great way that internships and apprenticeships can help out in that world, right? So this is, my colleagues and I came about 2020, 3 years ago now, developed this thing. I asked the silly question, what are soft skills? And nobody had a good definition. Well, actually, everybody had a good definition is probably a better way to say it. We found 41 frameworks of soft human enabling skills. And so what we did is we put them together, a pretty systematic process of converging the ideas, going out and also talking to people about what are some of these emerging human skills that may not be in the frameworks yet, and then did a whole card sort, the kinds of things you do when you're doing research. And we came up with this matrix for human skills. And the way to think about this matrix is there are 24 skills in there, and then around the outside, of course, you got the literacy, digital literacy, cultural literacy, financial literacy, organizational literacy. It's amazing how many people graduate school or college and have no idea how organizations work. And so how are they supposed to thrive in those organizations? I remember I was an engineer for 5 years. I couldn't tell you who ran my company. I couldn't tell you what the other divisions were that I worked in. Couldn't tell you how my company made money. How do you advance without knowing organizational stuff? Right? So we got 24 skills in there, and you can see some of the skills: critical thinking, comfort with ambiguity, persistence, integrity, empathy, relationships, empowering, project management. The way I would think about this, instead of just the 24 skills, I would think about it as the meta level skills that are in here. So you see the top is things that how I think, how I work. The bottom is how I manage or how I lead. The left is me, the right is other people. And so there are 4 sets of meta skills here to think about, whatever your skill list is for these human skills. How do I think? How do I interact? How do I manage myself? How do I lead others? Now, if you're doing a good job in education, you're doing that top left pretty well. Hopefully, if you're doing a good job in education, you're starting to do the top right pretty well. Some work gets into the accountability, some work gets into the bottom left, the managing myself. Although many times, what we think is training people in this is actually just filtering people. The ones who can already do it succeed, and the ones that can't do it don't. But how much are we also talking about the bottom right in the educational processes? Leading, project management, performance management, these kinds of things, right? My children, getting out of 8th grade and then getting out of high school again, had to write a thesis. And the hardest part about writing the thesis, besides the fact that it was just, 8th grade, I got to write a 10-page paper. Are you kidding me, right? That's hard for an 8th grader. But the other part of it was the project management. If I'm going to do this over a whole semester, how do I manage that project? And they learned that skill as part of the thesis also. So one thing to ask yourself is, as we are doing the STEM education, how are we embedding those human skills? For example, at MIT, now this is over 20 years ago, we realized that we were producing a lot of really smart engineers, but they weren't necessarily able to collaborate very well. And so one of the things that happens when you come to MIT, there's this, you get at the admissions office tour, the first thing they say is, we're going to teach you computing, we're going to teach you math, we're going to teach you physics, but we're also going to teach you writing, and we're going to teach you communication. And they say it very clearly. It certainly left an impression on my kids. If you're an engineer who can't communicate, you're going to work for an engineer who can. And also in this increasingly collaborative, globally collaborative world, if you can't collaborate, and yet many of the engineering programs, many of the top programs, don't necessarily encourage collaboration. They encourage excellence. They encourage you to be the best. And so if you're being held back by your team, well, let's just not work with those people. Now, I know you're changing, but I just want to come back to, where are we going and how might we change this in the world? So what do? We even teaching calculus, we have people co-teach that, and the students do a lot of peer learning. Every class, there are 13 skills, and every class has to have, I believe, 3 of them that are all non-technical kinds of things. Writing, communicating, presenting, working in teams, these kinds of things. It has to be built into the way your class is built. So we don't offer a class on, well, we do offer a class on writing because you do that in college, but we don't offer a class on collaborating or on relationship curation or these kinds of things, but we embed it into the technical courses, so you develop those as part of what you do. So I'm sure you do these kinds of things too, and if not, okay, you two go out and, it's a calculus class. Here's the problem on the board. Let's split you into pairs and solve this problem in teams around the board. That doesn't have to be calculus. This could be algebra. This could be physics problems. It could be anything, right? But solve it in teams. And then tomorrow, we'll put you in different teams to solve these things. Okay? So that's the human skills. Here's the other reason this is important, because we're going to live longer, right? The idea of retiring at 62 doesn't really happen now. At 67, 70, maybe, right? Certainly France had some real mess on trying to extend the retirement age recently. But if you're living to 100 years old, we can't necessarily afford to support you on Social Security for 35 years, right? Can we support you on retirement for as long as you work? The economics don't work that way. But second of all, if I'm going to live to 100, do I really want to stop working when I'm 65? That's a long time, right? So what's going to happen? Will careers go to 50 and 60 years? And what does that mean for the skills we learned when we first started? One of my colleagues, Sanjay Sarma, says it this way. He says that nobody would ever go to their doctor and say, I worked out and I was in really good shape until I was 21 years old, but I don't have to work out ever again. Right? And what do we do in the educational system? You work really hard till you're 21, 22, or 18, and then we never it's kind of the impression that you don't have to do that anymore. How can we have the educational system help you move beyond? Now, what do? Colleges offer master's degrees, or I teach a lot of executive ed courses. That's fine. What else can we do? What can we do also to link in, for example, in Connecticut, the vo-tech schools and the community colleges are working with employers to continue ongoing manufacturing training, to train you for your first job and train you for ongoing skills on a regular basis. The young people are with you until the school day is over. Community college courses can take over at that point, and then they offer night classes for people who are working full-time and have to do this. Collaborating together on the same equipment and some of the same courses to make that happen. So here's the problem. Educators can and should change your approaches. It's more than STEM. It's more than the first degree. It's more aligned with government and employers rather than arm's length. Number 2, employers have to change too. Think about careers, not just jobs, right? Why is it easier to hire somebody than to train somebody internally? It's just stupid. But it's because the internal systems in companies are so messed up that we don't even know where to find people and how to train them to move forward, right? How can we complement skills, not just automate? And how can the companies work closer with educators and governments to make this happen? Here's an interesting example. This is Newport News Shipbuilding. These people build aircraft carriers. And I'll tell you, this is the favorite case study I ever did in a lot of years of research, is getting to go to Newport News and get on an aircraft carrier and see it under construction and talk to some of the people doing it. What they've done is they're using a lot of technology, but they're using it to augment the workers, not replace the workers. So you see that up here, that gentleman has to weld a thing to a wall, right? Now, normally he'd have to get a blueprint. You can imagine how many blueprints there are for an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carrier is so big, he is 4 stories above the ground, amidships. So if he doesn't have the blueprint, he has to walk 10 minutes to the blueprint shed and 15 minutes back just to do that job. How likely is it that he's going to go get a blueprint? He's going to guess, right? And so they figured out, what do they do? Well, they're using technology here. I don't know whether this has a, there you go, to say, where's the right place to hang that thing? Well, you definitely don't want to do it in that pink area. There's an electrical box over there. You put a welding torch, bad things are going to happen. But you can do it over there in that green area. No problem at all. They're, first of all, helping workers do the right thing at the right time. They're making it easy to do the right thing. There's less rework they have to do. But here's the other thing. What a great training tool. Now, they say nobody under 40 years old can read a blueprint anymore. I don't know if that's true anymore at all. But why would you need to in this situation? The computer can help you. So, yes, it helps them do a better job, but it also is a great training mechanism to help them learn how to do the job. In addition, they get to see themselves in a broader context because you go like this, you see what else is around you, right? Other things, right? If I have to lift a box, if the box is red, don't lift it, get a friend. If the box is green, you can do it yourself. That avoids injuries, right? And there's a lot of teamwork because if I start a job and somebody finishes it, the computer makes sure that that handoff works smoothly. So what do they find? The employers are not only more efficient, but the quality has gone up, but the employers are more engaged, the employees are more engaged in their work. They're complementing with the technology, they're not replacing. What else do they do? Huntington Ingalls has an equivalent of a community college where they work with the high schools in the area. And they say, tell us your most promising students who probably aren't going to go to college yet for whatever reason. And we will bring them in to our training academy. And it's a hand-picked thing. You have to apply to get in. But if you're in, they'll train you to do welding or electrician or whatever they're going to do. You get an associate's degree. You get a job that pays really pretty well. And you can either do your career that way, or you do that for a while, and then you go back and do whatever you're going to do. A true collaboration between the educators, the community colleges, and the company to make this work. So you're not just getting out with a high school degree, you're getting out with basically the opportunity to get that welding certificate right away and make $40 an hour out of high school. Not a bad deal. For an 8-hour job with no stress once you go home, right? It's not bad, right? Where else are we seeing this kind of thing? Healthcare, it's really hard to hire lab technicians right now. They're just hard to find. So these companies are growing the lab technicians. Beth Israel in Boston, UPMC in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. What they do is they say, you know what? As a receptionist, you've been a great receptionist. Or in the cleaning crew, or in the kitchen crew, you're really good at what you want to do. Do you want to do something else? How about if we train you to be a phlebotomist? How about if we train you to be a lab technician? Oh man, I don't know, I'm not that smart. I can't imagine doing that kind of stuff. That sounds like really hard stuff to learn. Well, I'll tell you what, we will pay you. We'll work with the community colleges to get you the training on that. And you don't need to wait 2 years. 6 months in, you'll have enough to do this job. 12 months in, you'll have enough to do this job. And we'll make that happen for you. They know it's a good worker. The worker may not have the confidence they can do this, but the company will help you. It's like an apprenticeship, but you're already in there, and you don't have all the paperwork, right? That's another collaboration between the employers and the schools. Why can't we do that before you graduate? Find those same people, right, and help them be ready. I'm doing some work with City University of New York, and they're taking people who are out of school, giving them a 12-week program and making them ready for help desk, making them ready for these, med tech positions, these kinds of things, where, you're not going to have everything, but that gets you a job. And then from that job, you can do other things. Why wait till they're grown and out of school? Right? Many of you are thinking about how you work with community colleges to help people be ready, help your brightest students be ready to start that community college degree with some credits. Certainly AP programs help you have some credits. But what you're doing is you're positioning them, not you, right? But those programs position people to say, great, now you're ready for another 2 years or another 4 years of school before you can be employed. Can you do a similar thing with these other skills? Now, some of the other vocational tech ones, the ones that are going to get you on the more hands-on kind of skills, that happens already to make you employable. But these technical skills, these data science skills, these kinds of things, it's possible to do that too. Have you graduated, certified, and ready when you're going? I want to share a little bit more data with you. This was a survey of employers in manufacturing on their hiring criteria. And what do you see number one? Work experience. That's great, but what are we going to do with a new graduate for work experience? That's hard to do, right? Number two, an industry certification. And number three is associate degree. Now this is preference out of 8. So 1 means everybody said that was a 1, right? The 3s and the 4s, that's towards the middle of the pack, okay? But the certification was more valuable than a degree. Why is that? Because a degree means you were able to sit in a class and pass those tests. Certification means you actually know what you're doing. So can you embed those certifications in what you are doing in other places? Certainly it's happening in community colleges, in a very few community colleges. Certainly it's happening in a very few undergraduate places. Can you do the same kind of thing in high school? I want to bring attention to one other thing here. Now, first of all, 4-year degree, why is 4-year degree so low? Because the manufacturing technician job is not something you do after you graduate college, right? So that's why that's low. But look at this one. Projects we did within our academic programs, the lowest rank of all. So the stuff you do in your lab courses, the field study courses you do, not valued by the employers. Real work is. Actually having been there doing the work, okay? So just more thinking on that. So here's a group, SACA. They're in certification for advanced manufacturing. What's nice about these certifications? 40 hours of learning is enough to get you one of these certifications. 40 hours of learning. So this is the kind of thing that you can start to build in. I'm pushing really hard to say this has to be out of high school, but how can you get closer on this kind of thing? And the other challenge we've got here is why are, so we did some studies on, we're all highly educated people. We believe in education. The question came up, why do we offer courses to people and they refuse to take them in work? And why is that? Of course, you know why, right? Some people who have less education, the reason they have less education is they don't believe the education works for them. So if we give you an opportunity to take night classes because it's good for you, I don't believe that's going to pay off for me. Right? Especially if I do it, and I promise that if you do well, I'll repay the tuition, but if you don't do well, you got to pay the tuition on your own, right? And so what else can we do to help people be ready, more comfortable with that learning, like the health associations are doing, right? That we're gonna be with you. We're gonna help you make this change. We know it's good for you. We're gonna show you so you believe it's good for you as you move along. So as we think about these changes, what we want to think about is how do we get these solutions in? And unfortunately, one of the things that we're seeing in these programs is that we have different actors involved. We got educators, we got employment agencies, we've got employers, we've got nonprofits, all working in their silos and doing really amazing things with what I know how to do and do it better. And in the STEM education, there's some amazing things happening in there, right? But it's still a silo doing the work. And to give you another STEM analogy that doesn't work in other places, we have a multivariate nonlinear optimization problem going on here. And what is a multivariate nonlinear optimization problem? That means you don't have a single peak in that landscape. The performance function will look like this. A very rugged landscape with lots of peaks in there. And so what happens if you are on one of those mountains? How do you get better? Well, I do things that move me up the mountain. I'm getting better. Look, I'm getting better outcomes for the thing that I do. Right? Gradient descent, we call it. And the problem is, what if I'm on the wrong mountain? So for example, over here, right? Sorry, come back. Let's say that where you're working is right here. And you do some things and you climb that steep thing really quickly. Well, you're only halfway to the top. Where do you go from there? Everything that we know about optimization is about climbing that hill and making that better and better. How do we jump to the other hill? And the way that you're going to jump to that other hill is by collaborating. Right? That in these complex multivariate optimization problems, which we are doing here, it's going to be finding ways to connect across silos to do things better. And my thinking on it, connect employers and employment to the teaching that you're doing to some kind of certification scheme. Can we put those together? And then maybe we end up learning how to use a clicker. Then we end up maybe on this hill. And it'll be harder to climb that thing, but we end up higher. So, incremental changes in our own world's not, but how, this idea of working across, like some of the things I've shown you, but it starts with the mindset that the things I do are not enough. It starts with the mindset that those things that look really hard, maybe we need to tackle those challenges anyway. So in a Global Opportunity Forum, what are we doing? We think about it in terms of 3 things, and I think these 3 things happen not only for workers that are in their 40s, but also for workers that are 10 or 12 years old. Career navigation, what's possible for you? Now, you're not going to stick with that, but at least you have some idea what excites you, what you might go for, right? Because what excites people? What's what they see on TV, right? Or what they love, right? There are an awful lot of fashion design programs out there. A few people will get good work out of there. What can we do with fashion design and link it to other things? And some great stuff happening in STEM there now. My sister worked at a school that graduated a lot of people in crime scene investigation. And they would graduate about a dozen people every year, and 1 would get a job. Is that a service for the people? Well, they've got a degree, right? Career navigation, what's possible for me? Agile learning, let's make this happen in smaller chunks, so not only after you graduate, but you can do it in smaller chunks. You don't need to wait and get that next degree. And also credentialing, showing what you can do, not just whether you pass those tests. You would never go to a doctor who said, hey, I graduated medical school. You'd say, did you pass those medical boards? Right? There's a reason for that. So, in management schools, we talk about leading transformation. This is a big transformation process, and it starts with a vision. How can you inspire people and yourselves to make change happen? And, we're going to have a whole session on leadership in a minute. If I can just give you an analogy, a STEM analogy again, the way I talk about this to the engineers that I'm teaching, computers are remarkably good at doing what you tell them to do. Organizations are remarkably bad. And why is that? Because people don't do what you tell them to do. They do what you tell them as long as they feel like it's in their interest. And there's a zone of indifference, right, within which they will make a change. And if you get outside that zone, forget it. And if you're on the edge of that zone, they'll kind of go along but fight you behind the scenes, right? So the way I talk about it is you can tell computers to do things and they will do it. Organizations, you need to persuade them to do things. And that means having a compelling vision for where you're going and then trying to get show that it's good for everybody and then help people make progress along the way. How do you make progress along the way? You enable people to make those changes. How can we conduct those experiments? How can we put those tools together? How do we recognize what's working, what's not working? How do we celebrate those achievements, but then build on them to do something more? And then also you want to steer. Go ahead and let 1,000 flowers bloom, but you got to cut about 950 of them at some point to choose just the best ones and build on those, right? So you inspire, you enable, you steer. Or in management terms, it's your vision, it's your engagement of your employees, and it's the governance processes. So what are you doing in the systems you're working in to inspire change, to enable these experiments, and to steer, to choose? We get an awful lot of experiments, we celebrate, hey, isn't that great? And then they just fall on the floor, nothing ever happens. To pick up some of those and bring them to other places, to build on the things that are successful. Oh, this did not come out well at all. That's about half of a slide. I don't know what happened there. But the other thing to think about it is this is a mindset change. So what that means is what I've been doing for the last half hour is asking you to change what you think the role of education is. And it's hard. So I would ask you, one of the ways to think about it is, these are some things we're seeing that are changes in STEM teaching already. But think about, continue to go. There are things that farther down that are more about the employment too. there's a way that we think we do things. There are assumptions about what works and what doesn't work, and we need to change those assumptions. So in your heads, I'll give you some homework. One homework is, what are you doing for the bottom right of that matrix? What are you doing to teach children leadership, the young adults leadership, and not just the STEM stuff? Number 2, how are you embedding the human skills into everything you do? Number 3, what are your top assumptions about what works in educational programs and what doesn't? And how can you test whether those assumptions are true or not? Because what happens with assumptions? We all have fast and slow decision-making processes. And fast decision-making processes, you pick it up, you compare it to your assumptions, and you accept or reject really fast. You know that, right? Every time you say, that's not how we do things around here, or every time you say, that'll never work, what you're doing is you're testing across a set of assumptions in your head that may or may not be right anymore. What are those assumptions you got going? So as you think about these changes, I'm pushing you to change your assumptions. I've given you some data, I'm giving you some hopefully compelling comments, and you can see what happens. The other thing we're doing is we're building this Global Opportunity Forum, and the Global Opportunity Forum is about helping organizations to help people grow and thrive. And this is largely employers, but it's also more and more with educational institutions too, to try to cross those silos in that mountain range. Because employers can't do it on their own. Educators can't do it on their own, but we could probably collaborate. Each group will work on its own while we learn from each other. So important for all the thousands of funded programs that are helping people in STEM, that are helping people get to their first employment. We don't learn across those. We write the report, and we move on to the next thing. Forums like this are an opportunity for us to learn across and say, here's a good model. How do we build on that model? Challenger Center, what great examples of how to embed this into fun, not just lecture. Many other examples we're going to have coming up today. Learning from each other instead of just doing that next experiment. So how are we doing it? We are building working groups to take on tough challenges like career navigation, like data science learning, like certifications in these areas. We've got a research network of academics. We're building student clubs, the Model UN of careers, if you guys are interested in thinking about that. Regional activities, we did Boston, Manila. We were just in London last week. Podcasts, field projects, funded projects to actually do things on the ground. We're doing them in Manila, we're doing them in Boston, we're doing them in New York, starting some things in California soon. So we're getting there, right? 1 year in. So if you want to learn more, it's goi.mit.edu. There's a long sordid story on why it's GOI and now it's GOF. You can ask me over lunch, but it's a Global Opportunity Forum, but the website is goi.mit.edu, okay? But I want to leave you with this one point again. If we need to prepare people for 50 and 60 years careers, if we need to help them prepare not only for that first job, but for a whole career over time, that's going to take embedding human skills into the STEM work. It's going to be teaching people how to change, not just how to do that first thing. It's going to be finding ways to create educational opportunities as you graduate rather than try to get those educational opportunities out of there. It's going to be the opportunity to take people who are 35 and not just 15 and find ways to help the educational system help them without making them go back to a college and get a master's degree. We have a lot of things we need. It's going to be helping the 25-year-olds who realize now, oh, maybe I should have paid a little more attention in high school. What do I do now, right? It's going to take a lot of changes to make this happen. But I want to come back to this picture. The incremental changes, working on our own silos is not going to solve this problem. What we need to do is we've got to figure out how to collaborate across the silos to be on the right mountain and then climb that mountain to the top. Okay? So I want to thank you for listening. So do we do questions or do we just move on? We've got about 3 minutes. Any questions? I'll be out there too, so we can chat over the coffee breaks and stuff too. Oh, you got an app. Okay, there you go, see. All right, so I'll tell you what, let's give the 3 minutes back to the next speaker. I'll catch you guys in a break, but hopefully this gave you some ideas, and we can do more as we're talking, okay? Thank you.
All right, 1 second.
Oh, what?
We want to give you a thank you to George. I mean, one, just out of his busy schedule to join and to be with us here today. I think this conversation was incredibly important because I hope that you really took away some of those insights about the skills and what's necessary there. So on behalf of the STEM Leadership Alliance, George, we want to thank you for everything you've done and contributed.
Good to see you.
Oh, wait, George.
Where's your cell phone?